The Channel Tunnel, recognized as a wonder of the modern world, is one of the biggest engineering projects ever undertaken in the UK and France. The construction allowed high-speed rail transportation of vehicles across the English Channel through 3 underground and undersea tunnels. Governments of both countries designated Eurotunnel as owner of the project in 1986. The contractor was Transmaché Link, responsible for the design and construction. It consisted of 2 operating companies, one English and one French. The expectation was that this tunnel would spur economic development and improve European trade.
There were many management challenges throughout the construction of the tunnel. The project took approximately 20% longer than planned and came in 80% over budget at £4.6 billion. Many factors contributed to these cost overruns, including communication failure and inappropriate risk management. The latter will be presented on the complementary report. There was no rigorous set of technical instructions imposed by TML. English and French construction companies were allowed to utilize their custom methods, and tunneling initiated independently from opposite sides of the channel. Communication failure resulted in cost overruns, reduced efficiencies, and conflicts between stakeholders.
We have used Porter's diamond model, focusing on the complexity dimension, to evaluate the effectiveness of TML in managing communication during the initial stages and determine whether this was appropriate. The project dealt with multiple complexities, including a dispersed collection of systems such as stations, tracks, and 3 tunnels. This qualified it as an array project according to Porter's model. In terms of communication, this calls for maximum formality, emphasis on legal implications, and similar culture among constructors.
Hofstede noted that cultural dimensions affect the way project teams communicate. Despite significant differences, both national teams were able to take their own domestic law across the international frontier. In line with Lonsdale's theory, cultural differences caused unforeseen frustrations and impeded optimal levels of the operation.
Communications were problematic due to cultural and language differences and the contractual and legal complexity. There were both English and French versions of all meetings, documents, and even the contract, neither one of which took precedence over the other. The contracts created didn't define the work nor the risk transfers of the project, and thus failed to specify the details of a relationship that could be enforced. Complexity in the Channel Tunnel was severely underestimated and unsuitably managed. Maximum formality of communication wasn't achieved, as even the clauses written on contracts were open to interpretation. Furthermore, the absence of a governing law of contract shows that insufficient focus was placed on legal matters of the project. Finally, although geographically close, culture between the French and English constructors had many dissimilarities. It is possible to conclude from this analysis that there were inadequate communications right from the initial contracting stage.
For projects of a similar nature, we recommend a binding policy written by a separate, independent body, as this will increase formality of agreements, facilitate coordination, and enforce adherence to a contract. There should be a single contract developed and written in one language and based on one legal system. It must contain clearly defined dispute resolution procedures with which all parties are familiar and have agreed to abide. Differences in language, culture, law, and legal systems, among others, must be addressed from the conceptual stages, and the contract must be developed around these considerations. In project management, communication is a vital element, as team cooperation and efforts at the highest level are required, especially in transfrontier projects at the highest level of complexity such as the Channel Tunnel. TML's inappropriate management of language and cultural barriers led to major cost and productivity issues and significant discrepancies between binational stakeholders.